Before he became the legend, he was a hero, a man of brutal skill and unwavering resolve, born into the barbarian tribes beyond the reach of the Pelos Empire. He had every reason to be ignored, forgotten, kept outside the fold. But he wasn't. Through sheer strength, tactical brilliance, and a refusal to fail, Kazan rose through the Empire's ranks and carved a place for himself in history. He became the legendary Great General, the most feared and respected warrior in the realm. But he was not alone. By his side was Ozma, an archmage whose arcane might made him a legend in his own right. Together, they were the Empire's sword and shield, and through their combined strength, they saved everybody from the brink of annihilation. The Berserk dragon Hismar. It emerged from the depths of Arad. No army could stand against it. The skies darkened with its brood, and the Empire teetered on the edge of ruin and desolation. But Kazan and Ozma did what no others could. They led a brutal and unforgiving campaign into the heart of chaos. Sacrificing everything, and against all odds, they hunted the monster down and saved not only the Empire, but the world. The people called them saviors, heroes, champions. Statues were raised, songs were sung, and the Empire rejoiced, but not everyone was celebrating. The Emperor and his court watched from their gilded thrones, and what they saw wasn't loyalty, it was a threat. The love and attention Kazan and Ozma gained threatened their standing. Praise turned to fear, fear turned to envy, and envy, as always, became a knife. In the 157th year of the Iranian calendar, Kazan and Ozma were framed for treason against the Emperor. Stripped of their honors, they were tortured, humiliated, and betrayed by the very nation that they bled for. Kazan, Ozma, and his wife Rhys, all who had been childhood friends, were wrongfully branded as traitors and were punished as such. Rhys, defenseless, was murdered in cold blood. Ozma had his eyes gouged out before they executed him. Kazan had been brutally and mercilessly tortured, beaten, made blind, and his tendons were sliced, preventing the use of his arms and legs, but also ensuring he could never raise a blade again. He became tarnished. He was thrown in chains and exiled to the desolate icy wastelands of Mount Heinmach, left to die alone in the snow. That should have been the end. But fate didn't let go so easily. On the road to his execution, a sudden avalanche came cascading down. The prison caravan was shattered, guards buried beneath the snow. Kazan somehow survived, but he was broken, near death, his body failing in the cold. And it was in that moment, at the edge of life and death, that something found him. The Blade Phantom, a spirit born of war and vengeance, watching from the shadow above, sensed Kazan's strong body and wanted to possess the warrior's power. It offered Kazan a choice: let go and die, or give in to the fury burning in his soul, to rise and be born again. He did not hesitate. The phantom entered him. Bones crackled, flesh twisted, his wounds sealed. The man who had been left to rot in the ice took his first step back into the world, reborn as something else. A vessel of wrath, a sword sharpened by betrayal. Kazan emerged from the snow, breathing, seething vengeance. He should have died. He was just a broken body stitched back together by primal rage and something else, far older than rage. The legend didn't die. He staggered through the snow, bones still aching from the avalanche, the mountain winds clawing at his skin like wild beasts. Every step forward was rebellion, against death, against betrayal, against the fate that had been stabbed into his back. Mount Heinmach wasn't meant to be survived. That is why the Empire chose this barren, cold land. Ice-covered peaks with no roads, no maps, no mercy. A place for forgotten things. It whispered as he walked, the voice inside of him, coiling through his thoughts like a smoke, glad to have Kazan's body. Kazan didn't speak back at first, still uncertain of what happened as he looked at his hands and arms, which were now painted red. He had nothing left to say as he trudged forward, until he finally asked what happened. Blood struck a chord, and eyes surrounded him, blinking and watching as the phantom responded to him.
Our mission requires it. Surrender. Surrender to us now. You hear us. Join us. Or get out.
The voices of many spoke their mission, but also ordered Kazan to either join them or get out. It was clear the Phantom needed Kazan's physical form, but Kazan willed them away, keeping them from taking control. However, it was obvious as blood sputtered out of his weakened body that he would not survive if he did not surrender. The Phantom would tell him that if he wanted to live, that he would have to embrace the power of the blade. In the frozen clearing ahead, something began to stir. A nightmarish sword coalescing from the shards of crimson and violet light, like embers caught in a cyclone. It is almost as if it would command souls to come unto it. It pulsed like a heartbeat and twisted like a flame. It did not belong to this world. It offered Netherworld power, survival, but nothing comes free. It was a deal spoken without ceremony. Live and become something else. Die and stay forgotten. Kazan didn't answer with words. His body responded first. Pain vanished, cold retreated. His skin split, reformed, healed itself, all before his eyes. Bones reset, muscles surged with violent energy. The torn tendons in his arms and legs, severed by the Empire to ensure he would never lift a weapon again, forged themselves back together, infused with something not human. The transformation was agony wrapped in euphoria, like being set ablaze from the inside only to find warmth in the flame. His veins burned with an unfamiliar heat, and in the pit of Kazan's stomach, he was feeling quite hungry. Kazan stood in the snow, steam rising off of his skin, his breath no longer ragged but steady, alive, more than alive. He looked down at his hands, scarred and bloodied but radiant with supernatural energy, as he clenched them into fists. They obeyed, no trembling, no hesitation. His body thrummed with a power that defied logic, nature, and the Emperor. At his feet were blades, the same ones that once symbolized his command, his honor, his legacy, cast aside in the snow, waiting for him. The Phantom's words would slither out, telling Kazan to join them, and with that inevitability, Kazan grasped the hilt. Something clicked into place. Identity. His place in the world had shattered and shifted. He was no longer a general, no longer a traitor, no longer a man abandoned to die. He was a revenant, a vessel of wrath given form, and he had work to do. The Phantom did not offer peace, it offered purpose, so Kazan moved fast. Snow broke under his feet as he rushed forward towards his revenge. Each step was different now, sharper, focused, had gravity. The man who was supposed to freeze to death was gone. What remained was something colder than ice and sharper than steel. The first Berserker had taken his first step. Cutting a swath through the Imperial soldiers that were looking for him, Kazan would quickly step out into the clearing of Heinmach, where the moon haunts you. But heading into a cave, a trembling pressure made the world vibrate red. A Lacrima, a tear of a soul. The Phantom tells him that accepting it would grant Kazan strength. The Lacrima would then enter him like a fire through glass. No pain, just clarity. Someone else's sorrow, someone else's thoughts, their final thoughts before death, now laced into his bloodstream. their fear, their rage, their confusion. He could feel all of it. And that is when the Phantom revealed that not only would absorbing a soul grant him power, but also the memories of the dead.
A lacrima, a tear, a soul. Accept it. It will give us strength. Now you too will hear the memories of the dead.
That was the cost of what he'd become. The cost of his deal with the Phantom. Every soul he touched, every remnant of suffering or war he encountered, they would become a part of him. Echoes in his mind, shadows behind his eyes. Kazan would become their archive. The further he walked, the more lacrima he found. Bodies of forgotten men, fathers, husbands, warriors, and peasants alike, their deaths soaked into him. Absorb, feed. Not out of malice, but out of survival, and each time that he did, Kazan could feel himself slipping further from the man he once was. A living reliquary of the fallen. And so he pressed on, sword in hand, voices in his head, vengeance in his heart. He would come face to face with a bloodthirsty Yetiga, who had just finished smashing a soldier like he was a puny god. It fought tirelessly to try and defeat Kazan, but it would be no match for the vessel of revenge, and after a brutal backshot, it fell. Eventually, Kazan would stagger forward until he collapsed. That is when he was found by a shaman named Quimic of the Bantu tribes who once lived in exile beyond the Empire's reach. Quimic dragged him from the cave and nursed him back to health just enough to speak. Quimic offered him a warning. She could see it. See them. The several souls operating as one. Something was clinging to this man's soul, clawing for it. Because even rage needed a body. The ghost inside of him was not just a parasite, it was a curse, one that would never leave willingly. The Phantom had kept him alive, fed him its will, its power, let him endure just long enough. But now it wanted complete possession over Kazan's body, and unless he did something about it, he would be consumed from the inside, body intact, but soul devoured. There was only one option, an ancient ritual passed down through the Bantu, used to sever phantoms from warriors who had fallen into madness. A kind of exorcism, a trial of the three Bantu gods. Dangerous, yes, painful, and very likely to fail. But it was a chance. Kazan agreed, not because he feared the Phantom, but because he refused to be ruled by it, to be ruled by his phantom pain. The ritual began under the mountain's shadow of Storm Pass, as Kazan, chained by purpose, would begin the trials. The Phantom would goad and laugh at his attempts, but Kazan would not allow himself to be lost to the Netherworld. His first trial, he would fight against the dark souls of men who had served under him.
Kazan, why did you kill us?
But this was the god's test. To have Kazan face the darkness of his past, of the men who died in loyalty and service to him, of the ones that he felt that he abandoned. During the procession to the second trial, the Phantom would laugh at him again, certain that Kazan's efforts to exorcise him would be in vain. The Phantom believes Kazan isn't a threat.
So you survived that one. Not that it will make much difference.
After being gifted a spear, the gods would have him face the ghosts of his men again, who couldn't believe that their general was a traitor. But they also expressed the fears that, because they simply followed his orders, that they too would be branded as traitors.
Is it true, General? Are you really a traitor?
All we did was follow your orders. Are we not traitors?
With clarity guiding Kazan forward, the Phantom would again belittle Kazan for the guilt and anguish that he felt.
That's what caused you such anguish. Pathetic.
The general felt more than responsible for his men, and because of their association with him, they suffered. But Kazan would only ignore the Phantom. On his final trial, Kazan would face the abyss within himself, who would remind him that he had lost everything, that he has nothing to reclaim and nothing left to give. Even after Kazan took his revenge against the Emperor, he would still be without anything to come back to. But after banishing that ghost, Kazan would promise Ozma, his best friend, that he would be avenged. With all of the trials complete, the Bantu gods would grant passage to move forward and weather the coming storm. But then, that is when the Phantom appeared. Not a voice this time, but multiple voices, multiple forms chanting that they declare and that they concur.
We declare. Declare.
Before they converge into one, shadow and bone, a mask without a face, a soldier of the underworld, sword formed in hand. As it descended to the blood waters below, stepping forward to claim Kazan's body and soul, Kazan said nothing. Battle ready, he reached for his sword. The tendons in his arms, once severed, should have left him paralyzed, but he moved. The fight that followed wasn't just physical, it was psychological. The Phantom wasn't trying to kill him, it was attempting to wear him down, pushing into every wound, every memory, every betrayal to the surface. All of it weaponized against him. He was trying to mentally erode him, but Kazan didn't break. He resisted because this rage was his. And that is what the Phantom didn't seem to understand. This body wasn't his to conquer. The pain, the vengeance, the fire in his gut, it was not born of the Phantom. It was born of betrayal, born of being used and discarded. He wasn't simply going to be another mortal shell. Kazan wasn't locked in there with them. They were locked in there with him. And the Phantom saw that. Kazan's fortified resolve to take revenge on the Emperor of Pelos was indomitable. Despite its best efforts and frustration that Kazan would not simply bend the knee, it relented. However, Kazan would choose not to continue the fight, because even he knew that his body would not last without the power of the Phantom. And so, a blood pact was made of alignment and symbiosis.
I will have no masters. You need my body, but I need your strength. We don't need to be enemies. I swear on my honor, my blood. We can work together, cooperate. You help me, I help you.
The Phantom needed a host to fulfill its own mission, to rebalance the boundary between life and death, order and chaos, the Netherworld. And Kazan needed strength, real power, enough to rip down an empire. And so they agreed. The Phantom bound itself to Kazan as a weapon, and in return, Kazan would become its avatar, a blade. He let forth his rage towards the sky in a bellow, and the frost in his veins burned away. Kazan was vengeance in motion, the first Berserker. He cared not for anything but his revenge. It was his only purpose. Moving forward, the Blade Phantom reveals to Kazan that he had been summoned by Charon, the absolute ruler of the Netherworld, in order to restore balance to their realm. Someone named Daphrona tells Phantom that the disarray is due to a result of disruptions of something or someone in the mortal world. As spectral envoys bound by an ancient pact, these phantoms are the souls of powerful warriors collected throughout all time, converged into one, but unable to act in the mortal plane without a physical vessel. So, they had long searched for a body strong enough to carry their will, and when they found one, the prisoner whom they had believed to be broken and ready for them, they descended upon him. Yet, to their surprise, the soul they tried to claim resisted, for Kazan was not as weak as they assumed. They underestimated his resolve, and that mistake they vow will not be repeated. Arriving at the crevice, the dimension between the Netherworld and the mortal realm, Blade Phantom tells Kazan that nether energy is seeping out of the Empbars temple, so they have to go find out what is causing this. However, upon arriving, they discover the aftermath of a failed necromantic ritual. A report would explain that after the fall of Hizmar the Berserk dragon, the Dragonkin had gone into hiding at this temple. But this wasn't just any temple for the Dragonkin. They were drawn to this place because of a red power emanating from a device deeper inside of the temple. They had tried to summon a soul into a vessel, perhaps trying to revive Hizmar, but all that remained was a desecrated, towering, grotesque corpse, twisted and hung beyond recognition. After falling off a ledge and being born again, Kazan would then move on to hear the sounds of a lute playing off in the distance. Absorbing the soul of a corpse nearby a bard, the memory would play out where a bandit was begging for his life, saying that the noble was the one to blame for what happened to her. Speaking with the suspicious bard, he reassures Kazan that he is not a threat, just a poet who happens to be selling oddities.
Wait, your eyes see a thief, but I promise I'm not. I'm just a poet. Let your eyes and ears deceive you not.
Hopefully he won't turn out to be another Patches. He explains further that he was at the temple because he had a question for someone, but that person that he was looking for is either dead or gone. And Kazan doesn't inquire about the body laying a few feet away. Instead, the bard explains that the Dragonkin killed all the bandits here. Beneath the Forgotten Temple, Kazan sees a woman near a Nexus blade. Phantom's reaction to seeing Daphrona is laced with hostility and disdain. Referring to her as an unpleasant surprise reveals a deep-rooted contempt. This isn't just an unexpected encounter, it is an unwelcome one.
Daphrona, what an unpleasant surprise.
There's a clear implication that whatever history they share is antagonistic, and her presence immediately puts him on edge. Irritation, like facing a rival who's just complicated his plans. Daphrona immediately sees Phantom inside of Kazan, condescendingly remarking that he finally found a host before explaining that she was here on behalf of Lord Charon.
Blade Phantom, is that you in there? So you finally found a host body?
Oh, look. Charon's loyal little lapdog.
She found the source of the disruption, a device in the temple that had been drawing energy out of the Netherworld and into the mortal. She continues on about how the nether energy is necessary for governing that realm, but that without it, the flow of souls would be disrupted, creating chaos in the natural order of things in both worlds. Pondering why the device was here in the first place, Daphrona tells Kazan that the ancient Irradiant humans sensed the nether energy here, and so they built the device to draw its power out. But when Charon found out, he stopped and punished them. The temple would have stayed forgotten, but the Dragonkin found it and are now using the device once more. However, the device is only part of the overall problem, meaning Kazan and Phantom would still have more to do after this temple. Following the events of stopping the leak of Netherworld energy in the temple, Kazan senses a powerful aura calling out from over the frozen cliffs. A presence so overwhelming, it could only belong to the leader of the Dragonkin. Even Blade Phantom assumes it's their commander, but Kazan isn't struck with confusion. This energy, it's eerily familiar. It feels like Hizmar's. But that can't be possible. Kazan and Ozma defeated the Berserk Dragon, and yet his energy was undeniable. Pressing forward through the frost-covered ruins, Kazan finds the source, a massive figure restrained beneath the glowing eclipse. It's Viper, the Dragon King chieftain, towering, fuming, and unmistakably hostile. When the general questions him, asking if this is about vengeance for Hismar's death, the Viper responds with a roar. There is no reasoning, only fury. The two forces, past and present, clash in an explosive confrontation, with Kazan overpowering Viper. But just when it seems that the battle is over, that Kazan has subdued Viper, the Dragonkin leader does the unthinkable. Driven by rage, desperation, and something even deeper, Viper pulls out a bloodied shard, a scale of Hismar, the fallen Berserk dragon. Without hesitation, he plunges it into himself. The air begins to tremble. His body painfully convulses, and then it begins. Glowing cracks race across his scales like molten veins, golden energy flooding through his flesh as if his very blood is igniting. The cold, pale snow turns amber under the furious heat of the transformation. The moment stretches, quiet and blinding, as his body unnaturally contorts with otherworldly force. A vortex of embers and light engulf him. The ground quakes, the sky churns, the remnants of Viper's former self sheds away under the overwhelming power he has invoked, the power of Hismar the Berserk Dragon. He roars as the borrowed essence fuses with his own. His limbs warp, his muscles swell, his horns and claws sharpen as if reforged by divine wrath. And then he changes. The calm is shattered as he lashes out with a newfound might, tearing through the silence. He represents Khan's first real barrier throughout his quest. Part dragon, part fury, all destruction. His blows strike like meteors, his blood glows like magma, and his eyes are wild, consumed by the dragon's rage. Kazan is thrown back by the sheer audacity of what Viper has done. The general is in awe of what the power of Hismar granted his foe. The sky above feels hostile. The battlefield has become a crucible of gods, and the war isn't over. From the very first clash, Viper is unrelenting. Its attacks are brutal and feral, whipping limbs, tail lashes, devastating charges, its scorching blade striking into the ground, turning snow into magma, but Kazan matches them with precision. Parries come with brutal weight, sparks and red mist flying as steel melts claw. His swordplay is deliberate, grounded, almost surgical. When Viper swings wide, the hero dodges with ghost-like precision. When it lunges, he steps away just enough, letting the momentum pass before countering with a crushing overhead blow. But then, the world shifts. The sky blackens as Viper vanishes into the void, and for a breathless moment, all Kazan can see are two glowing eyes, floating, dancing, taunting him in the abyss. Everything falls silent, but for the distant rumble of thunder. Then, flash! A white-hot lightning strike rips across the sky, and in that instant, Kazan sees him. Viper already lunging. The flash illuminates fangs bared, claws extended. Kazan barely ducks away in time. The impact sends his enemy skidding across the stone, digging in to hold ground. A blood trail follows. He rises again, face grim, never flinching. Pivots and perfect parries slam Viper's arm back with bone-snapping force, followed by a gory riposte into the creature's exposed side. Blood arcs through the cold air in glowing ribbons. The fight reaches its crescendo. Kazan dives into the Viper's chest with a flurry of slashes, red energy erupting from every cut. Blood spills and Viper falters. Kazan slams his blade into the dragon's back, anchoring himself as he delivers the final blow, and the monster crumbles in a heap, gasping its final breath. But there is no celebration. Kazan stands over Viper's corpse, panting. Then he staggers. His red hand clutches at his chest as his knees hit the floor. And then we see it. The blood swirls up his arm. He remembers. He recalls the battlefield where he and Osmar defeated the Berserk dragon, a feat that should have earned them immortal glory. But Kazan can only remember the betrayal they received, not only from the Emperor but from other nobles, especially one Kazan calls out as Pavel. Kazan and Ozma both were blinded by royal decree, tortured, then executed and exiled. The once great general was powerless, forced to live in the shadow of that treachery. And now, kneeling in the same realm of blood and ash, Kazan makes a vow. His voice doesn't rise. The Berserker's rage is quiet, crystallized into something colder, sharper. His crimson eyes narrow. His hand tightens into a fist. The snow falls heavier now. He stands, and the hunt continues. With the mission to cross Pavel off his list being clear, they journey to Phraugh, but the village has been overrun by the Dragonkin. Villagers did their best to escape, but they had no hope. That was until Kazan arrived. He cleanly cleaves one in the back with an axe throw, allowing the villagers safe passage. However, as Kazan cuts a swath through the Dragonkin, he would find out through the memories of a dead man that Pavel never came to the village's rescue. So most were slain, and all of them surely would have been, were it not for Elemein, whom Kazan finds saving and protecting villagers from a giant demonic rain beast. It slams her to the side with a devastating force, but she does not relent. She picks up her shield and holds the monster off, giving Kazan enough time to tackle the beast down to a lower level. It releases a blood-curdling roar, heating up the battleground as it lumbers forward aggressively, hammering and nailing Kazan. Wide swings and disappearing attacks, the beast would even melt the ground, forcing Kazan to retreat upwards. But even Volbaino would not be able to hold a candle to the torch that was the wrath of Kazan. He would drive his greatsword into his spine, dropping the rain beast to the ground, and just when it looked like he would drop the hammer again, the spirit dissipated. But Kazan wouldn't linger as he proceeded to meet with Elemein, the woman who protected the villagers. She stood upright once more, battered but alive, eyes wide as she looked at the one who saved her. There was no fear in her face, only awe. The bloody general before her looks like a ghost torn from the past, wrapped in furs and battle-scarred. She thanked him for saving her, but he only asked where Pavel the nobleman was. However, she didn't answer him either, as she was still in wonderment before she asked if he was the great legendary General Kazan, but he didn't confirm it. The silence between them was answer enough. Still catching her breath, Elemein told him what she knew. Pavel, the name Kazan had carved into the stone of his vengeance, had ordered an evacuation of the village, but he never showed. She thinks something might have happened to him back at Palemion Castle. The road to Palemion was perilous. To reach it, they would have to pass through Skoffa Cave, a place steeped in danger. But Elemein, seeing something in Kazan's quiet fury, offered to guide him. She called him a hero, a true hero of the Empire.
It will be an honor to help a true hero of the Empire.
A hero. Perhaps once, but not now.
But that word no longer meant anything to him. Heroism had been carved out of him with his tendons, buried in the snow along with his name. Once, maybe, but not now. Before they set off, Elemein explained that the beast Kazan had struck down, Volbaino, was once beloved by the villagers. The kids even had a name for him, Volby. One day he vanished without a trace, only to return in mindless, violent rage. Whatever had twisted him into a monster, it wasn't natural, and the Dragonkin weren't the only ones falling into chaos. But venturing to Skoffa Cave, Elemein tried to mask her unease, recalling old stories of spiders and monsters that were said to lurk in the dark. She had hoped that they were just stories, but Blade Phantom already sensed the truth.
This cave. And what is that stench?
A wretched, sour stench clung in the air, heavy and wrong. They didn't make it far before the stories proved to be real. The cave was riddled with swarms of spiders, some the size of wolves, and other abominations crawling through every shadowed crevice. Kazan moved methodically, slicing down the beasts with precision. He would even come across remnants of old traps, barrels rigged with explosives by those who had come before. Kazan would ignite these barrels, sealing the spiders within. Deeper in the tunnels, Phantom noted that the smell was worsening.
The stench is growing worse.
And then they appeared. Goblins, creatures laced with nether energy. They had no place here. Their presence was a warning. The balance was failing. Whatever breach had allowed these beings into the realm of the living, it was growing. And Kazan's mission from Charon was becoming more urgent by the second.
Things must be getting worse.
Fighting his way through poison, flame, and corruption, Kazan pressed on until he stumbled into somebody unexpected. Standing casually amid the chaos, somehow untouched, was the Bard. The same odd man from the ruined temple, now deep inside a cursed cave filled with spiders, beasts, and the undead. He greeted Kazan in rhythmic tone, speaking in rhymes as if well known. He offered a tale, just part of the lore, of Digor, a man who had little but more. No gold, no kin, no noble life, just a voice, a face, and love for his wife. I love my wife. But then he stopped. He said no more. The general and the bard would part, until next time, when Kazan would hear what else was in store. Ahead, the path funneled into a narrow throat of a hallway, and beyond it, the wall pulsed with a mosaic of skulls, an image torn straight from a devil-may-cry hallucination. Kazan ripped forward. They dropped into the layer below, landing in the heart of a cavern webbed thick with decay. The space opened with tension. Elemein's eyes locked on a figure ahead, somebody strung up in webs. She rushed to him without hesitation, tearing through the sticky strands with her bare hands. As the webbing fell away, Kazan's attention shifted to the glob of green fluid dripping down from above. He looked up. The spider was waiting. Aratra dropped like a boulder, landing hard between them. Her grotesque form unfolded in a blur of pale limbs and glistening spines. Elemein didn't waste a second. She grabbed the unconscious man and sprinted to safety, leaving Kazan alone as the ground shook beneath him. Calm, cool, and collected, he stepped forward without fear. The battle began in a storm of blades and legs. Aratra reared back and swiped with one of her massive limbs, but Kazan parried in a red flash and his greatsword rising to meet her exposed side. He struck clean, the hit ripping open a line of blackened ichor across her abdomen. She shrieked, lunged again, but he met her with full force, steel ringing out against claw. Her movements were erratic, fueled by pain. She lunged, spun, and leapt into the air, only to come crashing down in a frenzy of legs and rage. Kazan sidestepped just in time, retaliating with a cleave that shattered one of her forelegs. Aratra screeched, rearing back. He pressed the advantage. Each strike carved into her, breaking her down piece by piece. He shattered another leg, forcing her to fall and stumble. Then he drove his blade deep into her thorax. She shrieked and reeled back, then, with sudden force, climbed up towards the ceiling out of reach. Kazan raised his blade, waiting, watching. Because she wasn't gone. From above, Aratra screeched. Her legs fully regenerated, before smashing into the earth in a final desperate attempt to overwhelm him. But the general was ironclad. He met her in this toxic battle, striking through her fury with relentless precision. Blow after blow landed, chipping away at her strength until her shrieks grew weaker and her movements slower. And then, with one last strike, Kazan drove his sword deep into her center. Aratra's body trembled, legs twitching, before she collapsed under her own weight. Still, silent, dead, her multitude of eyes turning white as life left her. Until Kazan turns around to head back to Elemein. That's when suddenly Aratra gets back up and prepares to spit toxic bile at Kazan. Luckily for him, in the same amount of time it took for him to turn around and see that the spider stood back up and reared back for an attack, Elemein was able to grab her shield and sword and defend him before the poison reached him. In the same motion, she lunged further and drove her blade into the spider's head, plunging deeper, solidifying the spider's death. Elemein was proud to have fought alongside the great General Kazan, even if only to show up at the last second of the fight to deliver the killing blow. As the spider's body turned to ashes, a dejected Kazan only responds that everybody thinks he is a traitor. not a hero of Pelos who saved the Empire from Hismar. But Elemein insists that what they think doesn't matter, because the fact of the matter is, he is a savior. Back at the crevice, Elemein explains that the man they saved is a blacksmith, but that now they can finally continue on to Palemion to find Pavel. However, before that, Kazan helps the blacksmith by defeating a giant bear who had his hammer, allowing him to now use the forge. After that, Kazan meets with a jarhead who obviously loved Elden Ring. Then, he heads back to Phraugh village to defeat a spectral Volbaino, sending the remaining revenants back to the Netherworld and gaining Daphrona's approval. She explains that because the Dragonkin raided and burned down this village, those who died here had strong hatred and vindictive emotions which turned them into revenants. The same went for the spectral Volby and the boy who cherished his friendship with the deer. It seems Kazan wasn't the only one with rage and revenge coursing through his soul, as many were still tethered to the mortal realm because of their vindictiveness. With that reminder, his task was even more so clear. Heading to Palemion for his revenge against Pavel and the Emperor, they find that the city's been scorched to the ground. Elemein even denotes this, now understanding why Pavel couldn't have made it to Phraugh. She then inquires with Kazan, asking him what makes a hero. But the broken man only says that there is no such thing as a hero. Yet, she would not accept that, remaining optimistic and certain that she still sees the world's savior standing before her. However, Kazan would only press on through the once great burned city. Blade Phantom anticipates that somebody strong must have been able to do this, but after slashing his way through leagues of enemies, Kazan would head down below, and as he was about to attack another who looked like a bandit, he would plead and assure the hero that he was no threat. When the general asked where Pavel was, he tells him that he ran down to the cellars with somebody who had blonde hair, but also disclosing that a madman, second in command of the Knives Vale group, the same bandits who set fire to the city, named Rangkus, was chasing after them. Andel furthers that he doesn't know why the bandits attacked Palemion, only that they were given orders by somebody high up. However, that's not all, because he even saw the letter that came with the command, and it had an Imperial seal. Was this the Emperor's work? Advancing forward through a large door surrounded by inflamed thorns to see two men fighting for their lives, Pavel calls out to Tristan for concern. But Tristan only charges at Rangkus, the mountain of a man who was trying to murder Pavel. Smacking Tristan to the side with his giant weapon, he menacingly steps forth to Pavel, crouching down and grinning before bashing him in. He would then turn, surprised to see that Kazan was still alive. After coming back with the new armor and a summon, Kazan would quickly dispose of him, stun-locking him. Despite Rangkus' best efforts, he would only end up with a sword in his back, his remains turning into ash. After the battle, Tristan would conveniently regain consciousness and kneel before his general, surprised that he was still alive and strong. Kazan would only look down at his subordinate, questioning why he was with that traitor, with Pavel. But Tristan says that he only pretended to betray Kazan in order to save Kazan. He explains everything. The moment that the Emperor sent Kazan's men to handle a border conflict, they were marked as traitors. Even though the border was peaceful when they got there, they followed Kazan's order through a letter and turned back to Vitalon, only to be ambushed by bandits who stole those written commands, proof of their innocence. During the ambush, Tristan was wounded, but it was Skalpel, another of Kazan's men, who saved them. Still determined, he returned to the Imperial Palace to report, but instead of being heard, Tristan was arrested for crimes he never committed. Without the letter, Kazan's men could not prove who they were, and they were only seen as men who tried to attack the Empire. However, it was Pavel who broke Tristan out and revealed the truth, that the Emperor orchestrated the entire setup to betray Kazan and his men. Everything was a ploy, to ruin Kazan and everything or everybody associated with him. Tristan swears that Pavel was never Kazan's betrayer. So Kazan feels remorse for having held such a grudge against him this whole time, despite still not specifically understanding how Pavel's betrayal saved him. But Tristan insists that the time for regret isn't now because he knows that the bandits weren't acting on their own volition. So if they find the letter that had the orders for destroying Palemion, they might also find out who was behind it all. The Knives Vale gang is in Nadin, so that is where Kazan ventures to next. But before going, Tristan wonders if the Emperor was the one who gave the order to kill Pavel and bring Palemion to ruins because of Maluca. Maluca was the leader of the Knives Vale and the Emperor's lapdog, and Kazan would also soon discover that Maluca was going to be the bane of his existence, his first real challenge since Viper. Arriving in Nadin, Kazan looks over the quarry and sets out to find Maluca, but soon he would stumble across Elemein, who says that she came and followed him because she wanted to help. However, she then tells the other half of the truth, that she was once with the Knives Vale bandits. At first, she joined them because they started out as rogues who were supposed to be different than other corrupted nobles. The Knives Vale bandits would help the helpless, but something changed, and Elemein would learn that they were just as rotten as those nobles. In fact, Maluca, once revered and righteous, would also change, becoming corrupt and needlessly murdering mercilessly. Unsure of when or why they changed, she decided that she couldn't stay with them anymore. Piercing onward through the ruined remnants of Nadin, trudging deeper into the heart of the Knives Vale domain, the stench grows worse the further he goes, thick and clinging to the back of his throat like rot. Phantom Blade speaks up, commenting on the foul odor. Something unnatural lies ahead.
Strange stench. What is it?
Then, the Grand Fortress comes into view. It looms over him, jagged and savage like a maw carved from stone and scrap. At the top of the stairs, Kazan knows he's found him. The doors groan open, and Kazan enters, the interior as brutal as its ruler. The room is drowned in red torchlight, but sprawled across the throne ahead is Maluca. Even from a distance, it's clear the grotesque aura was coming from him. Blade Phantom confirms it, disgusted. The commander of the Knives Vale lounges like a tyrant, his massive blade beside him, his armor cracked and scuffed but still terrifyingly intact. The general addresses the bandit, his voice ringing out firm and cold.
I'm here to make you pay for what was done to me.
He's not here for speeches or theatrics, he is here for retribution. But still, Kazan could tell that this fight was going to be difficult. White-haired fighters are always overpowered. Maluca rises, smirking, already expecting this moment. Then, the towering warlord launches himself from his perch, crashing down like a meteor. The fight is on. Maluca paces towards Kazan, slowly at first, posture relaxed, a smug grin carved across his face. He taunts him with a cruel edge, saying Kazan's name like he's amused. Then he poses the question, who would be remembered more, the great legendary General Kazan, hero of the Empire, or the man who killed him? Without waiting for a reply, Maluca lunges. The air splits open as his massive blades slam down, the impact rippling through the stone. The two clash in a furious melee. Kazan weaves through the opening, retaliating with clean, precise strikes, but Maluca's power is overwhelming. His swings are wide and wild, laced with violent rhythm, and each one threatens to rip Kazan apart if he mistimes even a single step. Maluca is grinning throughout the exchange, clearly enjoying himself. He jumps, spins, slams, relentless and unhinged. But Kazan doesn't answer with words, only with steel. He absorbs hits, bloodied, but returns with better ones, never letting Maluca's arrogance shake his focus. However, Kazan holds his ground, taking a moment to pull back, raising a hand as blood lifts into the air. A red orb forms in his palms, and Kazan begins to heal. Maluca watches from across the battlefield before spinning back to charge a stab that would send a vortex to pierce Kazan. But he lunges forward in a flash, dodging the tornado zipping by his head and swinging with everything he has. The blade connects. A violent impact crashes into Maluca, sending sparks and blood into the air. Maluca staggers, red embers bursting off his armor as his posture falters. He drops to one knee, using his sword to keep him from falling completely, rain and mud pooling beneath him. His head hangs low. A continuous flow of blood runs from his mouth, dripping steadily. Finally, he lifts his gaze, no longer smirking, eyes wide in disbelief at this impossibility. Then, Maluca's body trembles, still hunched in the dirt, but something inside of him begins to shift. He digs his hand into the ground, then braces his other against his chest. With a great growl of effort, he tears off his breastplate and casts it aside. Maluca begins to mutate. Dark tendrils coil around his limbs, pulsing with raw energy. The ground bubbles beneath him as corruption seeps outward in a ripple. He clutches his face, his eyes burning, veins surging black across his skin. The energy deepens in hue, thick like tar, and it begins to consume him entirely. From the sidelines, Blade Phantom watches, unsettled. There's no mistaking what this is. He recognizes the transformation for what it is. Chaos itself, taking root and taking over. Maluca's form lurches upright, surrounded by flashes of purple lightning and bursting in miasmic shadows. Horns erupt from his body, plates of jagged armor push through his flesh. His arm twists into a monstrous claw. And as he rises, fully transformed, even the air around him seems to recoil. Now, enveloped by the chaotic energy coursing through him, he soars into the sky before plunging down with cataclysmic force. The ground buckles beneath him, darkness flooding the arena in his wake. With twisted energy erupting around him, Virgil teleports forward, his attacks sharper and more erratic than before. He swings with terrifying speed, cleaving through the blackened battlefield with bursts of energy and shadowy surges. But Kazan meets the assault head-on. Maluca strikes, and Kazan answers with perfect timing. After images and red sparks one after another, relentless, clean, defiant. Well met, blow for blow, this is what the Berserker was meant for. Blades swirl, black ichor flings across the rain-soaked ground, and every step is soaked in chaos. At one point, Maluca spins violently, shrouded in a storm of energy, but Kazan slips inside the radius, bringing his greatsword crashing down in a heavy counter. They exchange blows in close quarters. Kazan drives his blade forward, carving into Maluca with grim determination. Maluca retaliates with a series of furious teleporting strikes, but Kazan has him pegged. The perfect parries flash in succession, bright red against the storm, turning Maluca's strength back against him. Their silhouettes clash amid the chaos. Sparks fly, water and corruption splash underfoot. The Berserker doesn't retreat. He continues to push forward, his greatsword carving arcs through the madness, each swing deliberate, each clash another step towards finishing this. But Maluca, seeing that he can't finish Kazan off longsword style, pulls out his two greatswords instead. However, he still continues to use the same moves he was using in his human form, so that was his biggest mistake. Because Kazan easily steps towards him, going on the offensive, pressing the advantage and laying down the pressure. Death by 1,000 cuts, precise dodges, surgical parries, and back-to-back perfect counterattacks. Kazan looks up at the towering demon who is now cowering in fear for the giant who's walking him back. To aura farm a little bit more, Kazan imbues his sword with flames, letting blood, iron, and fire unleash. But it is with a staggeringly heavy final counterattack that devastates Maluca, pushing him to the brink. Begging to make it stop, he pushes out an unrelenting chaos blast towards GOHAN, who is just standing there. But luckily, Piccolo rushes in front to block the blast instead of tackling him to the side. However, as Kazan blinks, he sees that he is now surrounded by the phantoms, telling him to stop chaos. Their power swirls around him, rising up to encase his arms in plated armor, energy filling him up as he roars out in Berserker's rage. With a powerful explosion, Kazan activates his devil trigger and looks up to see a chaos-ridden Maluca stomping in frustration as he thrashes forward to re-engage with Kazan. But now, he's way too powerful for him. and he easily gets put back down. The power of chaos failed him, but something different happens here. Where souls would normally turn to ashes and get sent to the Nether, Maluca's rips apart and immediately disappears. And this is alarming to the Phantom, who is confused, because the complete obliteration of a soul is supposed to be impossible. Souls always return to Charon. It is the natural order of things, the cycle between life and death, but the disruption it's caused is creating an imbalance in the flow, the worst thing that could possibly happen.
No, it cannot be. His soul obliterated. That's supposed to be impossible. Can chaos really be this powerful? Why is that so hard to believe? Souls do not disappear. Whether the body lives or dies, the soul is immortal. The souls of the dead always return to the Netherworld. This has always been the natural way of things. The never-ending flow of souls. The cycle of life and death that is the balance of the universe. But that balance has been disrupted. With fewer returning souls, the Netherworld has fallen into disorder.
The chaos, this old force, must be insurmountably powerful to be able to entirely erase a soul. It's up to them to find out what is happening. And after speaking with Elemein, she ponders about when Maluca started changing and remembers that it all started when he began visiting a place called El Ravaca. When Kazan and Elemein arrive, Phantom can sense chaos, but he says there is something else inside as well. However, the thought is abruptly shaken by the cries of help from Elemein, who went on ahead without Kazan. In a frantic worry, he rushes to her, but a purple vortex is slowly enveloping her and sucking her in with so much gravitational pull that she can't do anything.
Elemein!
General!
And with that, she disappears. But this won't stop Kazan from making his way through El Ravaca in the hopes that he would find and save her. It's just that when he does find her, she is trapped, held up in a circular device, while the chaos and lightning prevent her from escaping and Kazan from getting close. And yet, even after stopping the device, she's still not free. So he descends even further below, where the Phantom can smell the stench of chaos. The corrupt energy was emanating from the giant core, but as Kazan would kill a couple of revenants who ran straight into traps, he would discover that there was something malignant going on down in the labs. Somebody was here in the facility conducting experiments, mutating and creating amalgamations of monstrosities. All throughout the lab were these twisted creatures, some in containment tubes. But the most ominous, insidious thing was that somebody was trying to resurrect somebody else using the power of chaos. The question remains, who are the involved parties? Moving forward, Kazan kills the experimental subjects before coming closer to his next battle. Stepping forward towards the truth, Kazan approaches the chaos core to shut it off, but then a black hole opens up and swallows him. As the light enters his eyes, he's been transported somewhere else in the facility, but would quickly make his way back to Elemein. However, as she is released from her chaos prism, it is clear that it wasn't simply a cage, but rather a device that was injecting the chaos flow into her. So when she opens her eyes, Kazan isn't seeing Elemein, his ally, but instead a hostile, chaos-possessed version of her. Striking her blade against her shield, she ignites with thunder. It is a solemn moment, because as her soul has been consumed by chaos, she doesn't hear Kazan's pleas to snap back to her normal self. Against his will, he is forced to raise his sword against her lightning blade, and a resentful Kazan would slam into Elemein, pushing her back. Her body was exhausted, But the chaos crystal above her would begin to crackle, charging back to life once more before unleashing a torrential flow of chaos into her, absolutely refusing to let her tired body find rest. It surged and overflowed into her as she cried out in brutal anguish. Kazan tried to call out to her, but the only thing she could do was wail as her body would twist and contort in unnatural ways, the chaos force trying to purge its way out through her skin, purple thrusting painfully throughout her veins until her body just couldn't take it anymore, and she hit the floor. According to Blade Phantom, he says that the chaos nearly consumed her.
The chaos nearly consumed her.
But it didn't. She fought valiantly and managed to save her soul. However, a guilt-ridden Kazan couldn't bear to watch, so he turned away from his inability to save another ally, yet once again. His failures weigh heavier than the armor that he wears, than the great sword that he swings. But he can't afford to stop, so he proceeds, as another heavy chain of regret hangs around his neck. Speaking with Phantom, he says that Elemein's soul actually was consumed by chaos, which confuses Kazan a bit because he just said it only nearly consumed her.
Chaos devours the soul. Not even Charon himself can bring her back.
But semantics don't matter, because she's lost either way. Heading back to Tristan, he tells Kazan that Ilyna, one of his men, is still alive at the Linon Mine. This was a prison camp where men loyal to Kazan, who had been falsely accused by the Emperor, were sent to work until death. That is, if they weren't immediately executed. But later Kazan would learn that his men would meet an even more horrific fate than just being worked to death. When Tristan asked what Kazan will do when he finds the Emperor, he states with conviction that the Emperor will suffer. The mines are littered with enemies all around, but Kazan dispatches them with swiftness before reuniting with one of his men inside who is happy to see the general again. But it is short-lived because he urges the hero to hurry up and save Ilyna because he is about to be fed to what they call the Beast. That is what they were doing with some of the prisoners, especially the defiant ones. They would just feed them. Godspeed, Kazan makes it to the belly of the beast only to find out that it was a trap. Locking him in and raising the gates, the general peered into the abyss as something peered back, almost drawing the general in, before the beast itself tore out of the darkness and took a swipe. Dodging just in the nick of time, it slid past Kazan and across the skeletons before rising up to glare at his next meal. It was a grotesque sight to behold. The creature, Shaktuka, stood like a warped and mangled titan, muscles barely contained beneath its pulsating rotted flesh, and yet, with all that bulk, it moved like a wraith, suddenly launching upward in a near weightless leap that defied its massive size. Then came the drop. It brought its whole body down like an asteroid, attempting to crush Kazan with brute force. Even the general, amazed at how it could move, barely blocked in time. However, the beast spun back from the clash, dazed but not discouraged. In the blink of an eye, it surged forward again, this time clamping its enormous jaws around Kazan's body, crunching down with terrifying force. Blood splattered, yet Kazan didn't scream. It was as if he was driven more by instinct than pain, before he was hurled into the dirt like a rag doll. Before the dust could even settle, Kazan rose, dashing with no hesitation as he answered with a vicious spinning slash carving into the creature. The two monsters clashed in a brutal battle. Bones cracked, ground shook, and blood was sent flying. But Kazan was smiling. This wasn't just survival, this was fun. His movements became fluid, almost artistic. The beast would repeat the same bone-crushing combo that worked the first time, but Kazan would read it like a book, parrying every strike like he'd seen it all before. Then, with expert timing, he returned the favor with a punishing strike. The beast would leap away and try to attack with its hind legs, but Kazan saw that coming. With all of its animalistic rage, it would swing at the hero, but he would only reply with a devastating counter. Then came the overhead slash, one heavy, merciless arc of blood and steel that shattered the rhythm of the beast entirely. The tide was his, but Kazan wasn't done yet. As the beast scrambled in panic, the general's body erupted in energy. A dark crimson blaze coursed through him as his form was enveloped by spectral armor. He had activated the phantom form. The ground trembled beneath his feet as the very air thickened with murderous intent. The beast tried to respond. It thrashed, clawed, slammed into the earth, but nothing worked. Kazan saw everything, anticipated everything. His parries now weren't just counters, they were statements. Each one punished the beast's recklessness. Each one brought it closer to ruin. Each one a nail in its coffin. In a final act of desperation, Shaktuka charged, but Kazan mid-attack with one last perfectly timed, harsh counters before finalizing with a riposte, driving his blade deep into the creature's brain. Blood erupted in a violent geyser. The abomination let out its last choked howl before collapsing into a grotesque heap of twitching limbs. The nightmare of Linon Mine was silenced. Turning to see a now liberated Yulian kneeling before him, Kazan would meet him at eye level, glad to have saved somebody. But Yulian would urgently have a message for General Kazan. He explained that when the Emperor began to execute everybody,
I went to Osmar to ask his help in clearing your name. But it was all for nothing. They told me he was a traitor like you.
He went to Ozma for help, only to learn that Ozma was already executed. Except, Yulian would later hear secrets that Ozma was actually seen alive. Ozma's apprentice told him this, so Yulian believed her. But one day, when he went to go see her, he found the apprentice dead, and Ozma's grave exhumed. With this, Yulian, stalking from the shadows, would begin to eventually be able to confirm Ozma was alive. He saw him having a meeting with the Emperor. Yulian states that Ozma is behind everything, but Kazan only clenches his fists, refusing to believe this. He needs to see it for himself.
This cannot be. You know me, General. Would I ever dare lie to you?
I must know the truth for myself. I must go find Ozma.
During this time at the Imperial Palace, Ozma was slaying all the Imperial guards on the way to the Emperor. Against the greatest mage the Empire has ever seen, against the familiar purple energy that flew from his palms, nobody stood a chance. When the Emperor asked Ozma why he was doing this, Ozma only said that the time has come. Yulian tells Kazan that Ozma's apprentice, Trokka, is in Aldevir. She would know where to find Ozma. While here, my wife walked in on me playing the game and made fun of General Kazan's armor, saying that his breastplate looked like he had pointy nipples. I love my wife. Kazan, desperate to know if Ozma really is alive, lands in Aldevir. Strangely, the chaos has affected the humans here in an odd way, enabling the infected to appear as normal humans from a glance, but then they would attack. So Kazan would begin to just play it more safe than sorry by destroying all humans he saw along the way. For a brief moment, he would also try the spear again, and quickly learned that it was an astoundingly overpowered weapon, one that almost trivialized his experience, so he switched back to the terrible greatsword for a better time. Moving forward, Kazan steps into the shallows of a forgotten lake, its waters unnaturally still. The silence is thick, almost sacred, and the ruins that line the far edge, choked in vines and faded stone, feel like the remnants of some long-lost civilization. Each step Kazan takes forward doesn't ripple like normal water. Instead, it reacts, magic flaring pink with every impact. He also notices that green, almost seemingly poisonous, is creeping up his legs, but then The surface faintly lights up around him, as if the water recognizes his presence and shudders in response. The air begins swirling, small at first but growing with every pace. It converges into one area of the water like a living mist, bubbling in anticipation, and then he sees her. Blissfully floating out from beneath the water's surface like a mirage, a figure in elaborate garb slowly rises into view. It's Trokka, Ozma's apprentice, surrounded by an aura of power so dense it distorts the water around her. Her long hat and robes drift like ink in water, her presence ethereal, divine even. But there's something deeply disturbing, a corruption swimming just beneath the elegance. Grabbing her umbrella, she menacingly addresses Kazan, but he only cares to know where Ozma is.
Kazan! So you survived after all, I see. That's disappointing.
Ozma, where is he?
Dismissively, she plays with the dancing jellyfish she summoned, wondering what Ozma ever saw in him. Trokka was jealous and wanted Ozma for herself. Creating a torrential enclosure, Kazan just might have actually walked into his watery grave. As the fight ensues, Trokka thanks Ozma for the power he gifted her. The general wonders if Ozma perfected his experiments, mixing chaos magic and the science from the labs to resurrect the dead and imbue them with such terrible power, what was Ozma after? If it was just revenge, he would have simply killed everybody. But he was trying to resurrect. Who? There wasn't much to say about the battle between Trokka and Kazan. With relative ease, he was able to subdue her 4 hours later, dropping the water walls and opening up the entrapment. With her dying breath, she reached for the sky, sending her dying hopes and dreams to Ozma, gone with the wind, leaving only her soul and memories to be consumed by Kazan. One day, Ozma approaches Trokka, demanding to know why she hadn't killed a certain dark elf yet, stating that the elf knows too much. In light of this, Kazan heads to the ruins of Rovelion. The dark elf is hiding here, but the question is, why is she hiding at all? While venturing forth through the dark ruins, we would once again meet with the bard who warmly greets us. Kazan wonders how strong this bard must be for him to get around everywhere without any issues. But he is reminded about the next part of the grim tale of Digor. There once was a nobleman who coveted Digor's wife, but this obsession turned wicked, and that is when the bard stopped the tale, telling the general that they would have to meet again for him to hear the next part. Kazan asks him why is he here, but just like back in the Poison Cave, he explains that he's gathering the plague that comes from the trees in order to inflict a little pain. However, Kazan remembers his mission to find the Dark Elf, and after scouring through the ruins, he finally comes face to face with Beleriand. She is baffled and talks about how life was brought back with that power. But her statement is a bit hard to decipher because as she looks down at Kazan, she says Ozma succeeded. Just then, Kazan would see into the Chaos Crystal floating in Beleriand's hand. Whose life and what power is she specifically referring to? It's unclear, but that is when the Dark Elf's stone, the memory of Elemein being ravaged by chaos as she screams for the general, plays out. Blade Phantom recognizes that as part of the same stone from the Ravaca labs. Beleriand, summoning the unearthly from the earth, prepares for a fight, but she for some reason assumes that Kazan is one of Ozma's assassins. The elf tries everything from Blackfire to shields, even necromancy, summoning a Reaper to kill her would-be assassin. The general only takes but a moment to sit her down before picking up her spear and slamming it in the ground next to her. He did not come to kill her. She paused, visibly shaken, her confusion outweighing her aggression now. What started as an attempted execution dissolved into a tense, miscalculated misunderstanding. Slowly, the veil lifted. She hadn't expected to see Kazan alive, not like this. To her, he was a ghost, one of Ozma's cursed creations, resurrected through the same chaos-infused rituals that twisted the laws of life and death. Hence why she looked at Kazan and thought Ozma succeeded with that power in the beginning. But Kazan was no puppet. As the fog of confusion between them cleared, Beleriand explained what little she knew. Ozma had been tampering with secrets that were never meant to be touched. Resurrection, powered by a fusion of chaos magic and perverted science. Ozma and the Dark Elf briefly worked together, Balerion studying necromancy and Ozma studying magic. She revealed that Ozma had learned chaos magic in order to slay the Berserk dragon, but the power proved too great, and it eventually consumed him, corrupted by the very force he thought he controlled, beginning to use innocent lives in his experiments. That alone confirmed what Kazan had feared all along. Ozma was the one behind everything. After the Emperor's betrayal, Ozma sought revenge and more. All of the allies Kazan lost, the innocents he couldn't save, the struggles, the disorder between the mortal and Netherrealm. It was all Ozma. Knowing it was only a matter of time before he came for her too, Balerion would choose to escape and go into hiding. She furthered that Ozma's true obsession wasn't power or revenge, it was resurrection. There was someone he hopelessly wanted to bring back to life, and that obsession is what led him to collaborate with the Dark Elf in the first place. One can only assume it would be his wife, Rhys. Kazan, Ozma, and Rhys had been inseparable, growing up with one another since childhood. Ozma and Rhys would become husband and wife. It would make sense that Ozma would try to resurrect Rhys if the Emperor had killed her. This would explain all of the links and obsessions, the dark cravings for revenge. All of what he learned here would be substantiated with letters and records that reported on Ozma losing everything, using chaos magic, and the scientists that worked for him conducting experiments as well. Ozma had everything ripped from him. Even after saving the world, he was betrayed, lost his wife and brother. This was how the people rewarded him, how the humans rewarded him. Ozma would vow revenge against the Emperor, just like Kazan. Back at the crevice, Tristan would tell Kazan that Skalpel and his men posted there were struck with madness. Ozma was infecting everybody who was loyal to Kazan. But why? What did Kazan do to him? Worried for his loyal friend, he rushes to find Skalpel, but when he finds him, something's terribly wrong. The heavy silence of the chamber was broken by a sickening crunch as the hulking figure hurled a lifeless body aside like discarded meat. The corpse thudded against the floor, limp and twisted. Skalpel was crouched, towering, disfigured, and unrecognizable. With one deliberate motion, he raised his warped greatsword and drove it into the crimson-stained ground. A blinding red glow bore from the blade, coursing down into the earth before violently surging back up, trailing through the chains, seeping into the coffin behind him like blood flowing back to a heart. The chains reacted, tightening, and with a savage yank, Skalpel tore the sword from the ground. He turned, lifted the coffin onto his back, and in a single bound launched high into the cathedral's air, his body a blur of white and red. He came crashing down before Kazan with thunderous force. Kazan froze. Skalpel. The name left his lips in disbelief, but the monster said nothing. Its body coiled, unnaturally silent, as if caught between orders and madness. Kazan's gaze dropped, his voice softened, heavier this time, resigned. Wishing he would have been fine, but Skalpel rose, the coffin now affixed to him like a burden willingly carried. His head snapped sideways. Malevolent energy, seemingly different than chaos, pulsed out of Skalpel. He raised his skull sword and let out a roar that shook the cathedral. There was no mistaking it anymore. His old friend was gone. Later, Kazan would find a diary that explained that after the chaos energy got a hold of him, Skalpel would start to see a demon that lay dormant inside of the coffin. This was a coffin that Skalpel kept inside of his office. Now, Skalpel always had a certain predilection for bloodlust. General Kazan would even have to order him to give out quick deaths, but something inside of him always found it euphoric when mercilessly killing others. The demon inside of his coffin would grant him all of the pleasure he desired if only he made a blood pact with it. And now, here, standing before Kazan, the demonic possession of Skalpel. Kazan had to put him out of his misery. Skalpel lunges forward like a rabid beast, a red spectral force erupting from his back like wings of a fallen demon. But Kazan sidesteps, Without hesitation, he responds. His blade, ignited with a searing flame, trails Empbars as he swings in wide arcs. He charges his blade and violently swings as blood gushes through the air. But that's when Skalpel suddenly opens the coffin on his back. Demonic hands lash out and snatch Kazan mid-motion, binding him before he can react, tendrils trailing the coffin before it's placed right up. Skalpel leaps on top and drives his sword through the coffin, through Kazan trapped inside. The hellish coffin spits him out, and the door slams shut, but Kazan briefly glimpses the abomination chained inside. Its form is nightmarish, bristling with limbs and screaming faces, barely restrained. Whatever kind of demon it is, it just grabs Skalpel like a puppet, raising into the air and suspending blood droplets before crashing down, causing blood hands to stab up and push Kazan back as it rained blood. Blood and steel tempered the very air itself. It was a hard-fought battle, and Kazan wishes that he didn't have to keep killing his old allies. But with one last swing of his gilt blade, Skalpel dies. It's over. If only. The demon in the coffin isn't done with its host. Creepily, it reaches out of the coffin and drags Skalpel's corpse in, shutting the door. But this lingering moment never once gave Kazan a sense of security. He knew it was coming. The demonic atrocity bursts out and stands Skalpel up, refusing to let him rest. Then it picks itself up and throws itself on Skalpel's back, ready for round 2. As the fight presumes, Skalpel's life drains gradually, even when Kazan isn't attacking. The demon is desperately cutting its life into pieces, as this is its last resort. But the general calls forth his inner demon, exorcising Skalpel with a relentless fury. So with that, concludes the possession of Skalpel, who looks to Kazan, seemingly in regret, as the chaos and the demon fade away. Kazan absorbs his soul to see how Ozma tortured him, also revealing that he was the one who sent Kazan into exile, but again, why?
Skalpel, do not try to resist me.
Traitor! I know what you did to General Kazan!
You don't. You have no idea how much I care for him.
Care? Sending him into exile? Is that your idea of caring for him?
You will understand better when you embrace my new reality.
Was Ozma controlling the Emperor this whole time only to kill him? Ozma insisted that after he imbued him with chaos, Skalpel would see things his way. But out of nowhere, this remnant of chaos would rise, watching Kazan before charging at him. The hero might have been wounded, were it not for Blade Phantom, who blocked the attack. Even he was amazed at the sheer, raw power of chaos before he dispelled it, acknowledging that chaos has a master, somebody controlling it. Ozma.
Such raw power, this chaos force. At last, the source of the chaos taint. Chaos has a master. He binds it to his will, controlling it.
His name. Tell me, Phantom.
Ozma. It was him all along. Rejoice. Our missions are now the same. That's better. So, we're now mortal.
And now, the Phantom and Kazan's missions are one. Their journey takes them to Rovelion next, where they approach a painting.
Stop, mortal. That painting. There's something strange about it.
Reminiscent of a Dark Souls 3 DLC. Phantom warns Kazan to take caution as the painting seems alive, but Kazan doesn't care. Opening the grand doors, he is met with a mysterious woman attacking him with musical force.
Death echoing in the air.
On the way over to her, he listens to the memories of a dead doctor who hints at a princess who has gone inexplicably mad. Striking the ethereal oddity, she simply teleports away as a mysterious force urges for the music to continue. When Kazan strikes her once more, she disappears with her voice lingering, begging for death, but warns Kazan that he needs to do it fast before what is inside of her ends him instead. To no one's surprise, the bard is here as well. Needing to know what happened to Digor and his wife, Kazan inquires. The nobleman who was obsessed with Digor's wife hired him to sing at one of his parties. At first, Digor was excited, but then the bard's voice would crack, as when Digor arrived at the party, nobody was there. No one except his wife, who lay there, dead, killed by the nobleman. But for some reason, the bard laughed.
Instead, he found his beloved wife, eyes glossed over, slain by the horrors the nobleman had done.
And that threw Kazan off, because what's so funny? But perhaps, then again, why so serious? The bard says that Digor lost everything in that mansion, but begins to refer to this place, the one he and Kazan are in right now, as being full of memories of Digor's wife and of music and joy. The bard ends by saying to call it a send-off, a final farewell to those memories. Pushing forward, Kazan is met not just with the phantom of a woman who hopes he will end her tragedy, but with a reaper who wants to kill Kazan. After banishing the reaper, the voice begs Kazan to end the torment of her corrupted soul. However, when he meets the mysterious voice in the flesh, center stage, it's the chaos-maddened princess, Ilyna, who wants to dance with Kazan to a certain murderous tune. She strikes the hero elegantly, remarkably light on her feet. He has trouble keeping up. Soon, something in her would strike a chord, and the princess would infuse the chaos with her musical attacks, even raising an audience in black robes to enjoy the battle symphony. When the concert was over, as Princess Ilyna staggered to the floor, the audience would disappear. But she was thankful to the general for liberating her from the chaos Ozma cursed her with. She also told him where Ozma was, at the Imperial Palace. Her dying request was for Kazan to end this evil. At Vitelon City, under the black moon and swirling dark skies off in the distance, Kazan could see that the evil in the palace was immensely powerful. Strong enough to have its own gravitational pull as debris floated in circles around it. Ozma has brought the once great and proud royal city to ruin, and all of its people are either dead or corrupted. All except Digor the Bard, who states that he and Kazan aren't so different, as their stories have both been driven by a need for revenge. How he himself wanted to take revenge against the nobleman who killed his wife. Digor couldn't comprehend why so many innocent and beautiful things in life would always be tainted and ruined. Why were people so cruel? For a very long time, the bard wandered, beyond depressed at the loss of his wife, but then his vengeance somehow would begin to tie in with the generals. Kazan thinks he's gone insane, because the bard tells him to look at a corpse nearby, but looking around the room, there is no corpse. He must be mad. But Digor rejoices that they should both take revenge on the ones who drove them to madness and spit on their graves. The bard was in pain, obsessed. Not so much different than Ozma. But Kazan would journey on forth, soon coming face to face with one of his old friends. Laying in the middle of this grand coliseum was Hismar. A big reason for the corruption of this magnitude that was spread throughout the city was due to the chaos energy that was inside of the Berserker dragon. Ozma used chaos to defeat it, and part of that chaos still flowed within the corpse of the dragon. Many would wonder why the Emperor chose to bring it back to the city. His own hubris, his desire to show it off like a trophy, would cause everyone's demise. Walking up to it, his axe was still lodged in its head. When the hero tries to take it, dark purple energy causes it only to crumble.
It's been a while, old friend.
then the air would seem to still for just a moment. Then a rumble and a grumble. A crack would break up the silence, and Hizmar was getting up. It roared back to life, pushing General Kazan back, ready for its revenge. However, Kazan had already beaten it once, and now he was even stronger. So despite the imposing and intimidating stature of the legendary dragon, it was hardly a challenge. It was super easy, barely an inconvenience. It would try to fire off a pulse of chaotic energy at Kazan, who again stood there, watching it torpedo its way to him. So Blade Phantom, again, would meet the blast head-on to protect him, causing a magnificent explosion. Smoke rose into the air, but Kazan rose higher and descended upon Hizmar, axe to the dome just like the first time, expelling the chaos energy inside of the dragon, sending it up into the sky. Hizmar, the once great, legendary Berserker dragon, stumbled backwards on its hind legs to its death, crashing into multiple pillars, soon to be entombed by them. In that moment, after the dust settled, Kazan recalls the time he and Ozma defeated the dragon together, missing that specific moment of being on the same side.
To make a better world. Always, Kazan. My greatest friend.
Ozma, together we defeated this thing. What happened to that moment? What happened to us?
Reconvening with Daphrona, she tells us that we wouldn't be able to defeat Ozma without Charon's chains, a Netherworld tool. So, after defeating 3 Nether bosses, Kazan and Blade Phantom receive said chains. But Phantom is ambivalent because it seemed too easy, only to find out that his suspicions were correct because the chains rapidly began to stab itself into him. It caused him immense pain, but after that subsided, Daphrona would explain that while the chains were going to help against Ozma, it also had another purpose, to keep Phantom in check. She reminded him of the day that he once tried to defy Lord Charon, starting a war in the Netherworld.
The day you tried to defy Lord Charon. Bound in chains, your rebellion is no more.
You cannot defy me.
The chains were much like Sun Wukong's headband, where if he were to misbehave, it would tighten, causing him immense pain. With no choice, he is forced to accept, but before they go to face chaos, Phantom tells Kazan about the Transcendental Sword. It was a powerful blade that Phantom hid away during his rebellion against Charon. Finding it would ensure that their power would be restored, and they were going to need all the strength they could find if they were going to take down Ozma. So Kazan went to obtain it, but apparently it was a legendary sword coveted by many. This was a sword that would not budge for just anybody, and some would even conduct experiments on themselves trying to gain the power to wield it. Needless to say, Kazan had quite a few enemies in his way. However, the sword calls upon and forces one to face their greatest past regrets. So when Kazan shows up, so too does the remnant of Elemein, who challenges him, asking if he would kill her again. Yes, regrettably yes, despite the guilt haunting him, he would kill that regret, overcoming the negative emotions that bogged him down. His inability to save his friends. His reward? The Transcendental Sword, a nightmare blade with an eye on it, looking around as if it's testing one's soul caliber. But Daphrona would appear, telling the Phantom that that sword doesn't belong to him. That when balance is restored to the Netherworld, Lord Charon is going to come take it back. The Phantom can only snarl back and curse her. With the Netherworld's sword and chains, Kazan is ready to take down the Master of Chaos, but as he steps out, he sees a petal glide to the floor. He picks it up, reminiscent of happier times, when he had Rhys and Ozma and everything was easy.
Kazan, won't you join us for once?
The three of us together again.
I know you're always busy, but it would mean everything to us if you came to our wedding.
So many special moments. It's the perfect place to be married. Remember, Kazan, we'll always be together.
All Kazan has left is pain, sorrow, and rage. But bathed in a soft, otherworldly glow, Kazan looks ahead in silence, at a friend he thought he lost forever, Rhys. Confused, he asks if she is Rhys, but she only turns around and walks towards Kazan. They meet in the middle, amongst the pink petals, and in a solemn voice, she regards Kazan as her old friend. But to Kazan's dismay, the moment turns dark. Purple liquid seeps through the fake visage as Kazan understands now that it was Rhys this whole time. Ozma was trying to use chaos to resurrect her, to bring back Rhys, but this, what he brought back, wasn't Rhys. It stood before Kazan, but it only looked and sounded like her. It wasn't her.
Rhys, stop her, please!
Asking Kazan to join chaos, a fight would ensue. Kazan hopelessly pleaded with her to stop, but to no avail. She wouldn't stop. Her movements and attacks were graceful, angelic, and holy. But it was just wrong. This was unholy, far from sacred. Rhys had been desecrated by Ozma's obsession, and so he was forced to fight. No, he was forced to kill. He was forced to kill another friend in order to free her from chaos. Kazan was running out of allies to strike down. As she fell to the ground, closing her eyes, something inside of her would begin to shift and stir. Horrifically, with the sounds of bones and meat being warped, bloodied angel wings would shoot out from her back before encasing her, raising her up to reveal an even more corrupted form.
Phantom. Rhys! There is no way to save her now, mortal.
With her scythe, she would swiftly glide towards Kazan, who would desperately beg and ask the Phantom for help to save her, but the Phantom knew there was nothing that could be done other than to liberate her from the chaotic torment of being in this world. Delivering her kingdom come, Kazan would then try to step forward to help her, but Rhys would keep him at spear's length, falling on her own terms. She looked up to the sky, simply wishing to be able to see her beloved husband one last time. The light faded as quickly as her soul did, but that's when the impossible happened. Rhys, the real Rhys, presented herself before him, asking Kazan to save Ozma before ascending to the heavens. Kazan wanted her to stay, wanted anybody he loved to stay. He didn't want to be alone anymore, alone with his wrath and remorse. But Phantom would chastise him for spending so much time on these sentiments because they had a mission to complete.
Rhys, come back. It was the real Rhys.
Enough of this. We must finish this, mortal. Do what must be done.
Yes. You're right, Phantom. Ozma. He did all this. We will find him and make him pay.
So they go to the Imperial Palace, where the Master of Chaos would be. When the Phantom questions Kazan about Ozma, he says that he used to be a good man and an even better friend. But Phantom only says that all of that is useless. And right now, it is. Kazan knows that they've gone this far, and that the only thing he has left now is Ozma. Pushing through, Kazan walks into the audience chamber. Above, a tear in the heaven cracks with divine fury, as raw chaos funnels into Earth like a god descending, heralding the arrival of Ozma.
Kazan, how you must have suffered to be here.
His voice booming with twisted familiarity as he calls out to the friend he once dearly cared for, and also betrayed. Kazan steps forward, heart heavy, unable to hide the sorrow in his voice as he confronts the broken man his best friend has become. But that's when his eyes narrow to notice that the Emperor sits on the throne, dead, rotting, bugs crawling in and out of every hole they can find. Ozma talks about how he thought they would be saving the world by defeating Hismar, but how he soon realized the real issue was the humans themselves. Every problem on Earth stems from the taint that is humanity. They risked it all to save the world, and what did the people do in return? Gifted them with ruin and desolation. They killed his wife. On that note, Kazan asked why he did that terrible thing to Rhys. But that's the thing.
Because my Rhys is gone. And what you meant was an empty shell. Completely meaningless. Humanity has crossed the final line.
To Ozma, that wasn't Rhys, just a weak, mortal shell of her. Now, Ozma extended one final offer. Stand beside him, rebuild the world in their image, or perish. But Kazan made it clear that he came for one reason and one reason only, to end this. With a faint smile, Ozma answered in power, his body surging with energy as he began to transform.
Then this...
The fight between the god of rage and the god of chaos was a clash to determine the fate of the world. But this fight was intense, and to say that Ozma was a great mage would be an understatement. He overwhelmed Kazan with a variety of magical spells. Ozma opened the battle with a barrage of purple magic missiles, but Kazan interweaved through them effortlessly, executing perfect dodges with feral precision. When a sharper, faster arcane needle shot forward, Kazan met it with a flash of red, a perfect parry that cracked the air like thunder. Ozma followed up with a fiery beam, which Kazan barely managed to block, though the lingering flames still seared through his armor. The sorcerer closed the distance and slammed his staff into his old friend's side, drawing blood before leaping into the air and hurling a chaos bolt downward. Even though he dodged, the bolt embedded itself into the ground, pulsing with energy until Ozma fed it more chaos, sending its power crawling underground before erupting violently, but Kazan remained untouched. Ozma would mirror the spell with fire, the initial slam scorching Kazan, but he stepped back just in time to avoid the fiery eruption that followed. And that brief window was all the general needed. Kazan unleashed a cyclone of greatsword slashes, his strikes painted with fury, each swing building towards a single charged blow drenched in crimson rage. But Ozma wasn't done. He collected energy into his staff and unleashed a forceful shockwave, which, again, Kazan dodged, defying the odds. When Ozma soared into the sky and came crashing down for a killing blow, Kazan met it with one final perfect parry, countering with a brutal combo of slashes before driving his sword clean through Ozma's chest and tearing it out, each movement fueled by everything he had left. The great mage was knocked back, but he wasn't finished. He was only just getting started. With a furious cry, he thrusted his staff into the sky, unleashing a torrent of pure chaos that spiraled upward before detonating in a massive purple explosion. The blast ripped through the battlefield, scorching the ground and singeing Kazan's armor clean off. When the smoke cleared, Kazan looked up in awe and dread. Above him, Ozma soared and ascended through the broken sky, vanishing into what looked like swirling clouds. But they shimmered unnaturally, like a blood-red mirror reflecting something far more sinister. Cracking through the heart of chaos itself, Ozma absorbed all of the chaos energy and transformed into something ungodly. Then, like a divine meteor, Ozma crashed back down to Earth, cloaked in pulsating, oppressive, corrupted power that weighed on the soul just by being near it. He was worthy of the name Master of Chaos. But it did not matter what his name was. The first Berserker would rip through any magic that he threw at him, and soon he would draw out his phantom blade, driving it into Ozma's chest. But it almost looked like he was smiling. Tearing out the blade, the battle was over, and Kazan won. With the Empire in shambles and all his loved ones lost, Kazan would have nothing, and he would have nothing left to give. He stumbled down the steps, brought to his knees. The world ruptured around him, but Kazan was glad that it was finally over. Exhausted, he fell and fainted. However, with the nightmare of guilt that haunts him from killing Ozma and having nowhere else to go, the great general could only think of one place to go to now: Ozma's old home. Cold and crumbling, a remnant of the past. The silence here isn't peaceful, it's heavy. Even the walls remember what was lost. At a sword, he pauses to reflect, and a memory surfaces. Him and Ozma. Then another, Rhys, warm and gentle, wishing that the three of them could stay together forever. Kazan would make his way down into the dim cellar. The air grows colder, the path lit only by flickered candles, until he finds Lacrima by a coffin upon a bed of dying flowers, and with it, a final memory of Ozma's past. Kazan sees that Rhys was wrongfully murdered by the Emperor and his men. Ozma found her and was bewildered at the sight of his beloved having been brutally torn from him. He would beg Rhys to wake up, but she never did, and so he would sit in the dark, until one day the guards took him away to be executed, scorned by the very people he saved. His wife was killed because he saved them. How quickly they turned on him. He could see clearly from then on, humans were the problem. But Kazan still didn't understand why he chose to destroy the world. Heading upstairs to reminisce over a portrait, he would lay a white rose down to commemorate the loss of his beloved friends. But that's when the Phantom appears. Kazan tells him he can go back to the Netherworld, only Lord Charon has commanded Blade Phantom to stay here because chaos still lives. So Kazan simply nods, accepting that this is all he has left now. But in another ending, Kazan hesitates to strike down Ozma. Taking advantage of this hesitation, he knocks the Phantom out of Kazan, then proceeds to either corrupt or obliterate the Phantom's soul. But thanks to the chains that Daphrona told us to get, the other Phantoms were able to restrain Chaos, giving Blade Phantom just enough time to get back into Kazan's body, where he would then summon the Transcendental Sword and thrust it into Ozma. To Kazan's horror, he sees Ozma not as the monster he became, but as the friend he lost, offering a quiet, sorrowful apology for everything that he's done. Shaken, he was given no choice. He had to drive his blade into him, but the act leaves him haunted. And when a single tear falls from Ozma and lands on the eye of the sword, the chaos reactivates, surging back into his body, and Ozma immediately turns back into his chaos form. He tried to destroy the entire world in a last-ditch effort, with a powerful explosion that engulfed Kazan and the Phantoms, but ultimately Ozma failed. Kazan staggers out, calling for Phantom, but he doesn't appear. He collapses from exhaustion before waking up to visit Ozma's house, and it is here that Phantom does reappear. It tells Kazan about an eye and how its influence was the cause behind everything that he lost. But the general only chuckles at the thought, because he hasn't lost everything. He still has.
My revenge.
If you like this story, YouTube thinks you're gonna like this one next, so click it and let me know if YouTube was right.
All because of you.